Good evening, everybody. This is Mike with On Point Preparedness. And tonight is the night before the elections. And so the entire country and a lot of people around the world all have their focus on the elections and who's going to win or if anyone's going to win. But here tonight, you and me are going to engage in some Bible study that is still very relevant to what is happening in our country right now. We are going to talk about something called the Leaven of Herod. This is going to be a very fun Bible teaching because a lot of people don't know or sort of bypass the fact that there's two types of leaven referenced in the Bible. Whenever we hear the concept of leaven, a lot of people instantaneously just think of Pharisees. Pharisaical leaven, which is religious hypocrisy mixed with evil and malice. And you see this very common in Christian circles where someone will judge someone else and it's a harsh judgment, sort of rooted in hypocrisy, and they'll say, you're bringing leaven into this conversation. You're a Pharisee. Many of us are aware of that type of leaven. However, Jesus spoke of two distinct types of leaven. There is the Pharisaical leaven, but then he also mentions something called the leaven of Herod. So that is going to be the entire study of tonight's broadcast. And again, it is intrinsically tied to everything that we've been seeing in this country regarding the election cycle. So we're going to go ahead here and switch on over to the screen share, like always. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of scripture tonight. So first of all, let's start with the basics. Leaven in the Bible, and specifically the verse here in 8:15 of Mark, where Jesus talks about two types of leaven. Let's just go ahead and read in Mark 8. Now they had forgotten to bring bread, and they only had one loaf with them in the boat. And he cautioned them, that is Jesus, cautioned them, saying, "Watch out, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." Two types of leaven. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened?" So again, the apostles were thinking that he was talking about literal bread and literal leaven. As we talked in the types and shadow videos that I did before, many of the people in the Old Testament were still thinking in the flesh. It was only the prophets that really had the Spirit of Christ. But many of the other people were just living by flesh. That's why the law, expressed in ordinances in the flesh, was teaching them as a schoolmaster. Okay, they hadn't come to the point of where they were able to truly understand spiritual things, and this is a prime example of that. Now, we see that there's two types of leaven, and this leaven is common between them both, and that they're both really opposed to Jesus. So if we read further, what is that connection between the Pharisees and Herod, and what is leaven spiritually? Okay, not physically, what is it spiritually? So we look at a couple verses here. In Matthew chapter 16:12, it says, "Then they understood," what Jesus was saying, "that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of literal bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Okay? Well, what is this teaching? Well, in Luke 12, verse 1, it says, "In the meantime, when so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were trampling one another, he began to say to his disciples first, 'Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy.'" Okay, so we have some clues. Leaven regarding the Pharisees and the Sadducees is a type of teaching. It's rooted in hypocrisy. And if we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it gives us the last little bit of detail here. "Your boasting is not good. Do you know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Cleanse out the old leaven that you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Let us therefore celebrate the festival, not with the old leaven, the leaven of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." And so putting all these verses together, spiritually discerning what leaven is, okay, just leaven, not necessarily leaven unto the Pharisees or leaven unto Herod. Leaven is really the teachings and actions of a person that is rooted in hypocrisy, malice, and evil. When it's entertained, even just a little bit, just like a little bit of leaven that you use in bread, it infiltrates the believer's life and puffs them up, just like leaven puffs up bread. It's a great little parable. It's a great little analogy. So, this is what people are really waiting for in this teaching. What is the difference between Pharisaical versus Herodian leaven? So, as I mentioned prior, both are in stark opposition to Christ. And we see this here in Mark chapter 3, verse 6. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians. These are people that supported Herod, with the Herodians against him, who is Jesus, how to destroy him, who is Jesus. So if you look in history, the Herodians were a type of political party, and they were actually opposed to the Pharisees, but they said amongst themselves, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they banded together with the Pharisees to take down Jesus. So the Herodians and the Pharisees, and the leaven unto both of them is starkly opposed to righteousness. It's starkly opposed to Christ. And so now that we know that they're both pretty much in unison against Christ, and we know what the definition of leaven really is, we just need to apply that to the Herodians or Herod's leaven and find out exactly what that is. Okay, so we know that the Pharisees were religious hypocrites. They were boasting in themselves and their teaching, yet in secret they hypocritically break the same commands as they teach. And so we see this, in Christianity, just like I began this video. But what about Herodian leaven? Okay, it's the same boasting in and of themselves and their teachings. But here's the key difference. It comes from a place not of religiosity, if that's even a word. I made that up. I liked it. But of secular rule. People that are more concerned with upholding their ruler of choice, because the Herodians were all about upholding Herod Antipas and trying to expand his kingdom. Okay, and so they're really all about secular rule, and they have a very upstanding perception of themselves, just like the Pharisees had a very upstanding perception of themselves. And so even though they see themselves in a very high light, they treat others with malice and evil. So this little historical aspect of the Herodians is that you have Herod Antipas, and he was the one that befriended Pilate. He was the one that made a mockery of Jesus. He's the one that beheaded John the Baptist. The Herodians were trying to establish his rule back to what Herod the Great, this was Herod the Great who killed all the infants when the wise men deceived him, and he was just trying to, take out Jesus because this was the promised child who was supposed to become king, and he wanted to uphold his own kingdom, right? So that even Herod the Great was trying to establish his secular rule. He didn't want to lose that. That's why he murdered all those infants. But the Herodians wanted the second Herod to have his rightful kingship over Judea and reclaim rule over the areas that Herod the Great had. And so the Herodians were just all about secular rule. They were all about secular rule. They were a political party, and even though there was a tint of religion in there, they were mostly just say, frankly, obsessed with themselves. They thought of themselves very greatly. They were upstanding citizens. And again, Herod was a type of earthly or secular Messiah to them. Let's look ahead here at Acts 12 and just read a little bit about how Herod, treated Christians and how the Jews reacted to his actions. And when he saw that it pleased them, he liked to persecute the church. Because again, this sort of goes with upholding his secular rule. In Acts chapter 12, it says, "About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church, he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread. So, sort of interesting, the leaven of Herod during the days of unleavened bread. So, Herod, again, not really dealing with religion. He's just trying to uphold his secular rule. He's trying to reclaim the areas that Herod the Great had, and the same thing that the Herodians were trying to establish his rule there. And when he lays hands on Christians and he sees that it's pleasing to his people, which therefore upholds his rule, he proceeds to go further and further and further. It's like leaven. This malice and this evil just infiltrates him. And the hypocrisy comes in because these people think that they're doing righteousness. They may be following the rules of, or the laws of the land, because they were under Roman rule, so they were certainly following Roman rule, and they were probably upstanding citizens and things of that nature. But again, they were very obsessed with secular rule, promoting Herod, and did so even with malice and evil. I'm going to tell you how that really plays out today. And the next part in Acts chapter 12 is really going to drive this home for us all. But again, just part one summary of this section of Acts chapter 12 is that Herodian leaven is really faith, if you want to put that in quotes, faith in secular rule. Now this one, Acts chapter 12, and how I relate this to what's happening in society within America regarding the election cycle, this is really going to drive it home for a lot of people, to show you that what's going on right now has significant spiritual implications. Okay, very important segment here. Please pay attention. Acts chapter 12, starting with 20. Now Herod was angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and they came to him with one accord, and having persuaded Blastus, the king's chamberlain, they asked for peace because their country depended on the king's country for food. On an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes, took his seat upon the throne, and delivered an oration to them. And the people were shouting, "The voice of a God and not a man." Immediately an angel of the Lord struck him down because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. Now, you do need a little bit of historical context to what is going on here in Acts chapter 12. And so I just took two commentaries that I thought really dimensioned these four verses here fairly well. One is from Matthew Henry's concise commentary, and the other one is from an individual named Adam Clark. Okay, so Matthew Henry commentary on this says, many heathen princes claimed and received divine honors, but it was far more horrible impiety in Herod, who, and this is the important part, Herod knew the word and worship of the living God, to accept such idolatrous honors without rebuking the blasphemy. Because again, they said the people were shouting, "The voice of a God and not a man," and he took all the glory. He knew it was wrong. They were worshiping him as an idol, and he's like, I love my secular place. I love my secular rule. He accepts it, and therefore an angel of the Lord struck him down. So Matthew continues saying, and such men as Herod, when puffed up, leaven, with pride and vanity, are ripening fast for signal vengeance. Now, I really like Adam Clark's commentary here. Again, please pay attention as after this, I'm going to relate it back very strongly to what's happening in our country. So Herod was highly displeased with them of Tyre. So on what account Herod was displeased is not related by any historian, as far as he's been able to see. Josephus, who was a historian during that time, many of you will know his works from the whole thing about 70 AD and the destruction of Jerusalem, who speaks of this journey of Herod to Caesarea, says nothing of it, as it's really useful for us in this discussion, or it's useless for us in this discussion. Now, they desired peace with Herod, the Tyrrhenians and the Sidonians being equally subjects of the Roman government with the inhabitants of Galilee. Herod could not go to war with them, because they were subject to the Roman government. He was subject unto the Roman government just like they were, and so he couldn't really start war with people that he was feuding with. But he was still irritated against them, so he decided that he might prevent their supplies like food. And therefore, they endeavored to be on peaceful or friendly terms with him. Their country was nourished by the king's country, so they were getting supplies from King Herod. That is, they had all their supplies from Galilee, for Tyre and Sidon, being places of trade and commerce with little territory, were obliged to have all their provisions from the countries under Herod's jurisdiction. So again, we start to get a little bit of history here. So Tyre and Sidon against Herod, there's some animosity there, but they depend on him. He can't really go to war with them because they're all under Roman rule. But again, he may have been preventing supplies, and so now they're sort of feuding with him, and they're coming to him for supplies, and because they want food and drink and all these things, they are willing to call him a god. They're willing to, puff him up, so to say, so as to make peace. Now, this is the most important aspect of Adam Clarke's commentary. A day on which games were exhibited in honor of the Roman emperor. Talking about upon a set day when Herod put on these robes. What this refers to, we learn from Josephus. Herod, having reigned 3 years over all Judea, went down to Caesarea, and there exhibited shows and games in honor of Claudius, and made vows for his health. On the second day of these shows, he put on a garment made wholly of silver, and of a texture most truly wonderful, and came into the theater early in the morning, at which time the silver of his garment, being illuminated by the first reflection of the sun's rays, shone out after a surprising manner, and was so resplendent as to spread a horror over those who looked intently upon him. And presently his flatterers cried out from one place, one from one place and another from another, He is a god. And they added, Be thou merciful to us, for although we have hitherto reverenced thee only as a man, yet shall we henceforth own thee as superior to mortal nature. Okay, so they're calling him a god. So, real quick summary here. Going back to scripture, there's a little bit of feud between these countries, or these districts rather, and Herod. He's preventing supplies from getting to them. He can't make war against them, and so that's maybe why he was doing it. And so they make an appeal to him. They're protesting him, and they're willing to call him a god and not a man, presumably to puff him up and make peace. This all specifically happens on an appointed day where he put on these royal robes, per Josephus, made of silver, and the sun's rays shone on him, and he sparkled and was illuminated, so to say, as Josephus says. And the people appease him and puff him up, saying, This is the voice of a god and not a man when he delivers this oration. Okay? Pretty good summary. Now let's look today at Donald Trump and see these amazing parallels with what is going on here. Here's a tweet that I've covered in a prior video. Donald Trump retweets this tweet from this other guy, Wayne. Thank you to Wayne Allen Root for the very nice words. His words, quote, President Trump is the greatest president for Jews and for Israel in the history of the world. Not just America. He is the best president for Israel in the history of the world. And the Jewish people in Israel love him. Like he's the king of Israel. They love him like he's the second coming of God. But American Jews don't like him, or don't know him, or like him. They don't even know what they're doing or saying anymore. It makes no sense, but that's okay. If he keeps on doing what he's doing, he's good for. So you have Donald Trump, a secular leader, who says he's Christian And he should know the word of God, just like Herod was a Jew. He should have known the law. He should have never accepted praise as being a god. Herod knew it. He should have never accepted that praise of being made into an image of a god, the claims of these people. And similarly, we have Donald Trump, who these people are saying is for the Jews, just as the Herodians thought Herod was for the Jews. And they are upholding him as the second coming of God. They are literally upholding him to be like God, just like Herod was upheld to be just like God. And him, as a Christian who should supposedly know the word of God, should know that he should never take such accommodations from people, nor retweet it, which is an action of agreement. It is the exact same thing. I mean, you should see that fairly clearly based on the commentary that I've just read. Now let's just go further, because I thought this was interesting while I was doing research for this video. There's some accounts that you could say that I troll them. I don't really say anything to these people. I just watch them and investigate what's going on in terms of the current climate. But in these Q communities, a particular person said, "I witnessed the same phenomenon here. We were all standing next to each other, but it was like he was illuminated." And so they show a picture of Donald Trump being a little bit brighter than most. And I can't help but look back to the commentary from Adam Clark regarding Herod, where they say that he put on this garment made wholly of silver, and he came into the theater early in the morning, at which time the silver of his garment, being illuminated by the first reflection of the sun's rays, shone out in a surprising manner and was splendid to people, to where they cried out that he is a god, not a man. It's exactly what these people are saying. The most extreme people are saying he's the second coming of God. He's illuminated. I mean, we see this we see this so frequently in various different severities, right? I mean, these are probably the most significant and severe examples, but you have a cascading tiered effect of people saying that, Donald Trump is a man definitely chosen by God, or some say he's the second coming of God, or various different levels that people are at regarding all of this. And so just a real quick summary before we just maybe have a little bit of just casual talk about this. It really should provide a stark reality of today's situation, that leaven is teachings of a particular group that is rooted in hypocrisy, malice, and evil. You have Pharisaical leaven, which is religious hypocritical teachings, where they tried to have an upstanding view of themselves, and they teach these righteous principles to people, but they themselves are completely evil inside. It's the same thing with Herod, but from the political spectrum. A whole bunch of people that want their guy to reclaim rule, and they themselves see themselves in a very positive light, yet are also rooted in hypocrisy and evil and malice. So we see Herod and the Herodians. You see QAnon, which a lot of QAnon digital soldiers think is Trump. So you have QAnon, and then you have Anons, or Trump and Patriots. I hope you see this clearly, what is actually going on here. And just to like break this down just a little bit more, in terms of Herodian leaven and what I see in patriotic movements, and not to say that anyone that calls himself a patriot is filled with Herodian leaven, but you have to see that there is definitively scriptural evidence that it's a snare. This is the thing about leaven. a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And so, can you, walk a nice faithful life and still consider yourself a patriot? Sure, but with us getting bombarded, that's what I've really been focusing on the last couple of videos. When you are getting bombarded with this message of tyrannical overlords trying to take over the world, the deep state is trying to take over the world, this secret cabal, Bill Gates is going to give you this vaccine or this chip, the mask is making you into a sheeple, all this stuff. You have this clear front and present danger in front of you. And then you have patriots of all different walks of life and faiths and various Christian denominations. When they start standing side by side with you and saying, we're going to fight this with you, that gives you a positive feeling. And if you're not careful, that is like leaven. And if you're bombarded with enough of it, it's a snare. So you just have to be watchful about it. Because here's how I see the leaven of Herod playing out today. I've just showed you how it relates specifically to Trump. But I can give you a really good example of just how it's playing out with the riots that we're seeing. How many of you have seen on the news these West Side Story type of conflicts between Antifa-like people and patriots? I've seen a ton of them, okay? So let's think about the patriots. You can call them whatever you want. There's various different levels. I'm trying not to generalize and just throw everyone into the same group. There's the whole Proud Boys thing. There's the whole just patriot movement. There's the Q people. There's various factions, all sort of with the same motivation here, which is getting getting their guy in office. Okay. These West Side Story face-offs between Antifa and the Patriots. Okay. The Patriots, they see themselves as people that are righteous. We have conservative values. We are pro-life. We are, we hate tyranny. We're about freedom. Okay. I'm not saying these are bad things, but right in a typical patriot mindset, thinking very highly of themselves. Some of them may be Christian, some of them may not be. Let's focus on the ones that are not Christian, right? Patriots that are agnostic, okay? Conservative values, morals, all these things. We feel like we're good people versus these people that are rioting and burning down buildings and are all confused with the whole, you know what I mean, right? We have a very clear picture of confusion in terms of the whole radical left. I really don't need to express that anymore on this channel. But the conservative patriots, again, they're holding themselves in a very high light. Yet, when they face off, they're beating these people. They are outright putting on brass knuckles, bringing guns to the fight, bringing stuff, and they're pummeling each other, and they believe it's righteousness. That is what Herod was doing. That is what the Herodians were doing. They were persecuting Christians. Again, I'm not saying the Antifa are Christians, but you see the parallels here. They were persecuting Christians, trying to get their guy into office, and they thought that they were doing a good thing. Okay, so they were upholding themselves in a form of righteousness, but the actions that they were doing, which is harming people, that's the parallel that I'm trying to drive here. The actions that they were taking in terms of harming people was absolutely unrighteous. But they don't care because they see themselves in a good light. That's hypocrisy. Okay, it's the same thing with the patriots that are anticipating or even maybe looking eager towards violence. Like, we are going to take them down. Let's sucker punch them and let's take care of this once and for all. It's gotten too far out of hand, and we need to secure this country for our children and their grandchildren and whatever. Okay, thinking very highly of themselves because of their conservative values, yet they're using evil in order to get their way, rather than submitting to Christ because God said, vengeance is mine. Very, very stark parallels with the leaven of Herod. And so, as I began this live stream, I said this would be a very important biblical teaching on the eve of the election. As I mentioned in the prior video, I don't think any candidate is going to be selected by the 4th. As Donald put it himself in his own words, there's going to be bedlam across this country. In fact, looking at Drudge Report and other sources, they're putting up a non-scalable fence all around the White House. There's all sorts of businesses in the inner cities all across America boarding up their things. It's just not good. And as I've been talking about through months and months worth of videos, there are two opposing factions, neither of which is really rooted in righteousness in terms of what they are doing. And I hope that we as Christians just stay on the sidelines of this, because they're going to battle it out, vying for control. The beast system is not this tyrannical NWO overlord type of thing. It's what comes after. It's the whole false light, maybe oriented in Gnosticism and New Age that's going to come. When that comes, then the Christians really will start to get persecuted. Then it really comes down, because we're going to probably be the ones speaking out against how Christians shouldn't be aligning with this quote-unquote revival of moralism. So that's all I got for you guys today. About half an hour of biblical teaching here. Hope you all enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, I got a couple more videos for you this week. Not sure when they're going to be out, but we'll try to get them out. We'll see what type of crazy happens tomorrow and throughout the week. See what I can get out. Anywho, this is Mike with On Point Preparedness. God bless everybody. Thanks for tuning in.